They said no one in their right mind would dare disobey an order on the battlefield. Orders were survival. Orders were everything. Yet somewhere in the smoke of war there lived a man who did the unthinkable. He refused. And instead of disgrace, his refusal carved his name into history in a way few could ever imagine. It began in the dying days of a war most men had already given up on. The trenches were soaked in mud and blood, the air thick with the stench of powder, and morale had long since crumbled into silence. In that chaos stood Sergeant Elias Ward, a soldier who had survived longer than anyone expected, not because he followed every command without question, but because he carried in him a stubbornness that refused to die. The morning the order came down, it was whispered among the men like a death sentence. The commander had decided they were to storm an enemy stronghold that scouts said was impregnable. The fort was perched on a hill, walls lined with machine guns that chewed through anyone who dared approach. To charge it meant certain slaughter, but headquarters demanded it anyway, for honor, for country, for glory. Ward listened in silence as the commander barked the plan. His squad would be the first wave. The men shifted nervously, staring at the ground, clenching rifles they knew wouldn't save them. Elias looked at their faces, boys with hollow eyes, veterans too tired to hope. He saw not warriors, but men condemned to die for a line on a map. When the commander barked, "Forward," Elias didn't move. His boots dug into the mud as if anchored there. His men froze behind him, caught between fear and relief. And then it happened. The unthinkable. Elias Ward shook his head. "No," he said flatly, his voice cutting through the gunfire like steel. The silence that followed was heavier than any shell. Disobeying an order in war was mutiny, punishable by death. The commander's face went red with fury. He pointed his pistol at Ward. "You will lead this charge, Sergeant, or I'll shoot you where you stand." Ward didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, locking eyes with his commander. "Sir," he said, his voice low but steady, "if we go up that hill, we're all dead before we take 10 steps. You know it. I know it. I won't march my men into a grave for nothing." The tension crackled like lightning. Every soldier's breath seemed to hang in the air, waiting for the gunshot that would end Ward's life. But then something shifted. One by one, the men behind him lowered their rifles. Their silence was an answer. They weren't going, either. The commander's hand trembled. For a moment it seemed he would pull the trigger, but in the distance the thunder of artillery shook the ground. An enemy barrage struck the hilltop fortress, flames lighting the sky as the stronghold crumbled under fire from a distant Allied division. Ward hadn't known was advancing. The impossible fortress was falling without a single one of his men needing to step into the slaughter. The commander's pistol dropped to his side. His eyes flickered with something between shame and awe. The men turned to Ward, their faces lit not by fire but by something else. Hope. By refusing the order, Ward hadn't just saved them. He had preserved the strength of the entire unit. Word spread faster than bullets. The sergeant who said no. At first it was a whisper, a rumor that moved between camps, but soon the name Elias Ward became a legend among soldiers who were tired of blind obedience and endless sacrifice. He wasn't branded a coward. He was hailed as the man who had the courage to stand against death itself, not by charging into it, but by refusing to bow before it. After the war ended, records of his defiance were quietly buried. Official reports did not like stories of men who disobeyed. History books left his name out, choosing instead to glorify the commanders who signed orders from the safety of their tents. But the men who had stood beside him remembered. They carried his story home, telling it to their children and grandchildren, each version adding a little more fire to the man who said no. Some swore Ward stared down the commander without fear. Others said the entire battalion followed him in defiance, though the truth was quieter. The truth was one man alone, refusing to lead his brothers to death. Yet sometimes the smallest truths make the greatest legend. Years later, an old veteran who had served under Ward was asked what made him different from the rest. The man leaned back, eyes misty, and said, "We were trained to follow." Ward reminded us that sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is refuse. And so, in the echoes of forgotten wars, his name lingers, not in official history, but in the hearts of those who heard the tale. The soldier who refused an order. The soldier who became a legend. Because sometimes heroism isn't in the battles we fight, but in the battles we refuse to fight, and in that refusal, Elias Ward found immortality.